Now let's start a very important topic that has been in news throughout 2020, and that is the draft notification of 2020, which was put forward by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in March 2020. Now this is a new draft notification that has come, which is basically a modification upon the last notification that was put forward in 2006. And before that, one major notification, the first notification that had come for EIA in India was in 1994. So it's not that there haven't been other changes. There have been certain modifications, certain amendments that have been made in the rules, but these you can say are the three broad notifications that have been brought in. Now since the time it was put into the public forum in March 2020, we saw that there were a lot of controversies that marred this particular notification. So there are certain aspects which have raised red flags, and these red flags have been raised by some environmentalists, some activists, other conservation scientists and researchers. So they all have put forward certain issues that they have seen in this notification. So let's have a look at what are these certain changes that have been brought in, and because of which it has come into the controversy, and what are the kinds of things that are being opposed. So the first thing that we need to understand is the categorization. So when you look at the projects, we talked about that there are various projects that are taken for environmental impact assessment, and these are various projects. It can be a coal mine, it can be a hydroelectric power plant, it can be a cement factory, it can be a metallurgical industry related something. So there are a lot of things, a lot of areas that are being covered. So all these areas which need environmental impact assessment, they have been categorized. So the projects basically get categorized into three categories: A, B1 and B2. Now if you go by the last notification of 2006, there were only two categories. One was A and one was B. These were the only two categories in 2006, but 2020 notification has brought in a little modification here, and that is the categorization of category B into B1 and B2. So let's understand what is A, what is B1 and what is B2. So first of all, when we talk about A, in both the cases, when you talk about 2006 and 2020 notifications, these are the projects that have to be evaluated by the central government. They have to be evaluated by the central government. Then you have B1, which will be taken over by state governments. So here also B was basically for the state government and A was for the central government. Then there is B2 that has been added, and when we talk about B2, these are the projects which will be exempted. These are the projects which are exempted. Now when we talk about exemption, it means that these will not require any specific environmental impact assessment and they can directly pass through. And there are a lot of projects that have been categorized into B2, and once a project has been categorized into B2, then there is nothing that will be done for these projects. So for example, if you go back to 2006, in 2006 also B2 did exist. So in this B also there was B1 and B2. But the difference was that B would be first evaluated, and once the evaluation has been done, that is the screening, the first step that we talk about, when the screening has been done, after screening it will be decided whether it falls under B1 or does it fall under B2. So if during the screening process, it is decided that it needs to undergo environmental impact assessment, then in that case it will be categorized into B1, and if it is felt that it does not need any kind of environmental impact assessment, then it goes under B2. But the change that we have here in 2020 notification is that it has been predefined. It will not be defined after screening, but rather many of the projects has been categorized into B2 before the screening process in the notification itself. So this is one issue that has been raised. So for example, if you look at all the projects that have been categorized into B2, these are the list of projects. For example, all the offshore and onshore oil, gas and shale explorations, hydroelectric projects up to 25 megawatt. So 25 to 75 megawatt is under B1, and anything that is greater than 75 megawatt, that comes under A. So hydroelectric projects up to 25 megawatt come under B2. Then irrigation projects between 2000 to 10,000 hectares, inland waterway projects. Now, inland waterway projects we need to have a discussion separately on. We'll have a discussion on it. Expansion or widening of highways between 25 to 100 kilometers with defined parameters. Then aerial ropeways in ecological sensitive areas, specific building construction and area development projects, small and medium mineral beneficiation projects, small foundry involving furnace units, some categories of re-rolling mills, small and medium cement plants. This is important. Small clinker grinding units, acids other than phosphoric or ammonia, sulfuric acid, micro, small and medium enterprises, that is MSMEs, in dye and dye intermediates, bulk drugs, synthetic rubbers, medium size paint units. So these are the things that have been defined under category of B2. Now when we talk about B2, there are certain areas which become very, very important. 2019, the ministry had put forward a recommendation of a total of 111 river pathways that can be converted to inland waterways. 111. Similarly, there is a project going on for the widening of national highways. Now when you talk about these two will have a very important effect on the environment. For example, when you talk about widening of highways, many of these highways go through the national parks or wildlife sanctuaries, and that's why we need to understand that we need to ensure a minimum amount of disturbance that could be caused to these kind of areas. Once you take up the projects like widening of roads, etc., then you are basically starting to do habitat fragmentation. If you remember, we had talked about habitat fragmentation, and once habitat fragmentation happens, all the native species, all the species living in these areas will face problem of even extinction in the coming generations of their species. So these are the kinds of problems that exist. We will see a lot of deaths of these species that will happen, because in all these highways there would be vehicles that will be running at a very high speed, and because of these high speeds there will be a lot of accidents, there will be a lot of deaths of the animals residing in these kind of areas. Similarly, there will be a lot of ecological disturbance that can be caused by inland waterway projects. For example, all the freshwater fish, the different varieties of aquatic animals, they will be disturbed. Their natural habitat will be disturbed because of the inland waterways that will be built. So that will be another issue that will be faced. So if you talk about the environment, these two will have very detrimental effect on the environment. Similarly, we are talking about offshore and onshore oil, gas and shale exploration, which will not require any kind of environmental impact assessment. This is again something that is very, very dangerous, because once these projects are taken, after that there will be no thought that will be given to, let's say, the biodiversity of that area or the people living in that area, the communities residing in that area. There will be nothing that will be done for all these, because once they have been taken, the only thing that can be done is there will be some kind of rehabilitation plan that will be put forward for them. So this is one very dangerous aspect. Now similarly, when we talk about small and medium cement plants, we will also take a case study where we will try to understand what has already happened. There is a particular case study that I'll take up, and you will understand how these kind of things, although which look to be not very dangerous, can be very, very detrimental for the environment, and what has happened in the past even when these were not the part of the rules. Because 2006 notification does not say anything particular about small and medium cement plants, but still there have been cases in India that have been observed where these kind of cement plants have had a very bad effect on the areas where they have been built. So that's why this point of categorization becomes a thing to worry about when it comes to the new notification. Now, one more issue that has been raised is with respect to public consultation. So when we talk about public consultation, 2006 report basically had talked about a 30-day window for public to review the project, to look after all the aspects of the project. Now this basically has been reduced to 20 days. This has been reduced to 20 days, and this again becomes something which is dangerous. Now when you talk about public consultation, the project that is being taken up first of all has to be notified. This notification can happen through a newspaper, it can happen through an advertisement, it can happen through posters, it can happen through, let's say, informing the Gram Panchayat about it. So there are various ways in which it can be done. And this earlier was 30-day window, now which has been reduced to a 20-day window. Now when we talk about 20 days with respect to 30 days, since this time period has been reduced, there could be certain issues that the public may not even come to know about. Many a times they may not even know that there was a notification that was put in, and they may not get proper time to review this. So once it has been put forward in the public domain, there has to be minimum amount of time that is given for public review, so that people by and large and the experts can review everything, and if they have any suggestions, if they want any modification, if they have any issue with the project, they should have ample amount of time to review the project and to raise any kind of concern that they want to. And once you have reduced this time reduction will also have a negative impact on what the public opinion could have been on the given project. Now, one reason that is given for why this time period had to be reduced is on the basis of that many a times when a project has been notified, there are many elements which just try to bring in a negative impact, which try to bring in a negative opinion in and around that project, and they try to mobilize people against these projects. Many a times these projects may not be as bad as they have been portrayed to be, but they get ample amount of time to do so. But even though, let's say, even though it is happening, if something is positive, if the project does not have any negative impact, the project owners, the government will have enough reasons to pursue the people that yes, this is something that is going to be positive, that will have societal benefits, that will have environmental benefits, that will have a lot of benefits with respect to the growth and development of the region and of the country. But once this window has been reduced, you take away these kind of suggestions that might have come from the people just because you want to look at certain negative aspects of this issue that existed. So that is one more problem with respect to public consultation being reduced. Now there is something else, and that is strategic projects. Now when we talk about strategic projects, this is something else that has been put forward in the new notification. Now when we talk about strategic projects, the normal way of thinking for you might be that this is something which is related to maybe defense sector, or maybe it is something which is very, very important for national development. If these two were the things, then it's good. But the problem is that the notification has not defined what exactly a strategic project is. Now when there is no definition of strategic project, then in that case anything can be put forward as a strategic project. I know that may not be the case, and maybe we are thinking far too ahead, but at the same time you have to understand that it is not defined. It has not been defined in the notification that what exactly strategic project would be. Now when it comes to the strategic project, one thing that has been written with respect to strategic projects is that it will need no public consultation. So strategic projects will need no public consultation. It can be put forward directly. The project can start directly without taking people of the area into account, just because they have been defined as strategic. So that's why I'm saying that if it was a defense related project, it is still understandable. But if it is not, a simple infrastructure project can also be put forward as a strategic project, and after that nothing can be done about it. Because as you know that if something comes as a money bill in the parliament, there are certain restrictions and it becomes easier for the bill to be passed. Something similar will happen with the strategic projects also, that if something has been defined as a strategic project, then after that there is no public consultation and it becomes easier for the project owners to pass the project. So that's why it can be a very simple project also. It can be a cement factory that can be put forward as a strategic project. What would the public do after that, right? So this is one major problem. Then after that, one more very important aspect that needs to be understood is post-facto approvals. Now when we talk about post-facto approvals, this means that we are talking about approvals that can be taken after the project has been started. Now this is something which is very bad, and this is something that completely goes against the very notion of environmental impact assessment, that the project has been started, project is going on, we don't know what kind of effect it can have on the environment, on the communities living nearby, on the human health, etc. But these are the projects that have started, and after starting they can take the approvals. It's very simple. I mean, you can take the approvals after starting it. Now, one argument that is put here also is that new projects will not be given post facto approvals, but the ones which are already running can be given post facto approvals. Now, what does this mean? There are certain projects which have been running without getting the clearances. There are many such examples that are there in India today, that the projects have started without even getting the approvals. Now, these projects which are already running, which have already started, now have the option to apply for a post facto approval, and they have the option of going forward with it. So it becomes very simple for all these projects which are still running, which are already running without any prior approval. And think of the problems that it can cause. May 2020, we saw two problems, one in Assam, Tinsukia, and one in Visakhapatnam. When when we talk about Visakhapatnam, the LG polymer plant, where there was a leak of styrene. When the evaluation was done after the accident, it was found out that this plant was running for approximately 20 years without any prior approval. 20 years it was running without the approval. And what do? We do nothing. And what does happen? We lose certain lives. Similarly, in Tinsukia, in Assam, there was another accident in Oil India Limited plant. And this also, when the evaluation was done after the accident, was found that approximately for 15 years it was running without any approval. So these are the kinds of problems that already exist, and we are now trying to legitimize these things. Now take this for example. There are 239 dams today in India which are awaiting clearances, where all of a sudden, if the notification is passed, then these will no longer, perhaps either will not need any clearance, or they can apply for the clearance and get it. 239 dams without getting clearances. We know that each and every dam, and there have been so many controversies around so many dams that have been passed in the past in India. We know that they are detrimental to the given forest or the ecosystem wherever they are being built. Not to mention the rehabilitation of the communities which are living in these areas, which has to be done after that. So once post facto approvals can be done, it becomes very simple for all these running projects to get an approval now. Similarly, when you talk about these approvals, we also come to one more point, and that is about the violations. So if you talk about the violations, who can actually come forward with the violation and report it? There are only two such stakeholders. One, it could be the government agencies, any of the government agencies, and second, the project owner themselves. So even if a violation has to be reported, this violation has to be reported only by these two. Isn't it convenient? Either it has to be a government agency, or it has to be the owner of the project. Earlier, it used to be public also. It could have been an NGO also. But now, these are the only two stakeholders that can report a violation. It's very simple. I mean, I have to commit a crime and go to the police station and say that I committed the crime, or the police has to catch me. There's no third person who can report a crime. It's that simple. So this has happened here. Not only this, the projects that have violated Environment Act of 1986, they also now can apply for a re-evaluation, because post facto approvals are a thing now. So this again is a very big problem. So when you talk about the post facto approvals, this has a lot of problems associated with it, and we'll take certain examples also how these can become a very big problem in the coming future. Now, after this, there is another issue, and that is with respect to the quality of report. So when we talk about the report, we discuss this, that when you talk about a good EIA, when you talk about a good environmental impact assessment report, it needs to be simple, it needs to be readable, it needs to have all the important aspects of the project. That is one. Apart from that, there is something else, and that is about, if you remember, we discussed something called as the baseline data. So when the baseline data is collected for the report, it is basically done for 2 to 3 seasons. It is done for 2 to 3 seasons, or it can be done for 2 years in the same season. But when you talk about the new notification, the modification that has been made now is that even if only one season is taken, that is enough. The only thing is that it should be a non-monsoon season. It should be a non-monsoon season, but any season can be taken, any one season can be taken, and that will be enough to take the baseline data. So this is again something which is not good, because you know that there are many seasonal changes that happens in India. There are many changes in the environment, in the ecosystem that will happen with these changes. And if only one season is considered, then in that case we will never have the entire report. We will never have the entire set of data which is required. For example, we talked about what kind of effect it can have on land, what kind of effect it can have on water, on air. We know that if you, let's say we talk about air quality, we know that air quality of North India, especially Delhi, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh regions, will be very bad if you consider the months of November, December and January. There will be the smog situation that will come into the picture. But if you consider April, May or June, they will not have such issues. So if the data has been taken only for, let's say, April, one season of summer season, and hasn't been considered for the winter season, there are completely two different sets of data that you will have. And depending on that data, if the report has been constructed, you don't know what kind of effects the project can have. Let's say it's a project which will give out a lot of particulates. It will give out a lot of particulates, that is the particulate matter, into the atmosphere. And the baseline data that has been taken for the summer season, for the month of March, April, May, etc. So once this project starts to function, what will happen? The data has been taken according to the summer season. In the summer season there will be no issues, but once winter arrives, once the smog situation arises, then all of a sudden we'll see huge impact on the air quality in these areas. It will have huge impact on the human health, it will have huge impact on the flora and fauna of the region. All these things perhaps will not even come to know about from the report itself, because the baseline data was taken only for one season. So this is one problem that we see with the report. After that, as I said, that the report also has to be ensured that it comes either in English or in Hindi or in any of the languages, any of the scheduled languages which can reach the last person. So because even if you talk about all the scheduled languages of India, there will be many people who will still not be able to read and understand these reports even if they are in these languages. So that will be another issue that will be caused. For example, let's say if you are going to a region which is not so developed region, the literacy rates are low. So in that case, even if there is a report, unless somebody is able to explain them about the report and what the report says, until then there is no point in having these reports. So these aspects of the report also needs to come into the picture. Not only this, we have seen in the past, and we'll take certain examples, that the quality of report in the past also hasn't been very good. Many a times there have been errors that have come in the reports. There was a report of CAG in 2016 also. In 2016 report, CAG has said that the quality of report that EIA has is very poor in many of the cases. Not only this, there is also the problem of scoping. If you remember, we had discussed what is the meaning of scoping. So now what happens is, for many of the projects now scoping will not be necessary. Scoping will be required only if it has been said that the recommendation for scoping will be sent to the appraisal committee only if it is required, only if it has been deemed necessary. So until now that was not the case, that scoping will not be required. But now there will be many projects where scoping will not even be required. So if scoping is not required, we don't know what kind of issues might arise, and there is no problem whatsoever for the clearances to be obtained by these kind of projects. So these are certain areas of problems that has been reported with respect to the quality of report. So all these things that we have discussed, these are the major aspects of the issues that have been raised by many of the environmentalists and the conservation scientists and researchers. Many of the activists also have come forward and they have raised their issues, their voices with respect to the report. So initially the report was published in March 2020. From there until June 10th, the time was given for the public to send their comments. Now you have to understand, this is the time of COVID. Just before the lockdown was announced, one day before that it was put into the public forum. And once it was put into the public forum, the people did not have much time to look into it. First of all, the interactions were limited because of the lockdown, and after that, until June 10th, the time that was given, the 60 days time that was given, was maybe less given the situation at that point of time. After that, there was an extension that was asked for, and people and activists had asked for the extension to be done until August 10th. But what the ministry did after that was that they just extended it for 20 more days. The extension was provided until June 30th instead of August 10th, but then the High Court came into the picture, and High Court had then recommended that this extension be made until 11th of August. So until 11th of August this was done, and once this extension was provided, because of this extension being provided, there were a lot of voices that were raised, there were a lot of recommendations that were made, there were a lot of objections that were made and were put forward to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So this is, although this is also good that we got such a huge amount of time, because if you go back to 2006 notification, it was something like nobody knew that there is a new notification that had come. There was no social media, there was no online interaction, and the interactions were very limited with the public. So it was a situation where this notification came in, the draft was put into the public forum, and there were not many who came to know about this. So, but this time around, this is something which is positive because of the interactions, the online interactions, the social media. There have been a lot of issues that were raised with respect to all the negative points that are there in the draft notification, and people have raised their voice with respect to the same. Now, this is all that you need to know about the draft notification with respect to all the controversies, all the problems that have been raised. Now, even when the draft notification of 2020 had not come, and all these issues that we have discussed in the past 15 minutes or so were not in the picture, still we have seen that there have been many issues that have been there with the EIA. In the past, we will see that there have been many issues with respect to the compliance to the reports, with respect to whether the laws are being followed, with respect to the quality of reporting, with respect to the quality of EIA that is being made. There have been many such issues. So we should also understand certain issues that have happened in the past. You should understand certain case studies with respect to the EIA and what kind of issues have happened in